The morning air felt heavier than usual, yet there was a quiet clarity in it, as if the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Julia stood by the window, her hands resting lightly on the curve of her belly, and breathed in the calm before the storm. 3 months, that was all she had been carrying. Yet it felt like a lifetime of dreams, fears, and quiet strength had grown inside her. The apartment was small, every corner holding memories that now felt like ghost traces of laughter, moments of hope, and the sudden absence of the one person she thought would be there forever. She had woken that day with an odd sense of peace, a sensation that something monumental was about to happen, though she could not have guessed what. The coffee she brewed in silence steamed gently on the counter, filling the tiny space with warmth. Her mind wandered to what could have been, to a life she had imagined with Tyler, full of promises whispered in the dark, of plans for a future, now left incomplete. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the quiet rhythm of life within her, the steady heartbeat that reminded her she was not alone. The envelope on the kitchen table was what shattered that peace before it could even fully settle. It was simple, unassuming, yet it carried a weight that pressed down on her chest like a stone. She recognized his handwriting instantly, the careful loops and precise letters that once made her heart flutter, but now they brought a strange, hollow ache. She unfolded it slowly, almost ceremoniously, as if delaying the inevitable could change the words she was about to read. "I'm sorry. I'm not ready. Leaving is the best thing for all of us. Please don't look for me." The room seemed to tilt. The words were sharp, concise, and final, leaving no room for negotiation or hope. The man who had promised her forever had vanished, leaving only a note and an absence so profound it echoed in every corner of the small apartment. Julia's mind raced, questions colliding with emotions too complex to name. How could someone leave when life itself was growing inside her? How could love, something she had trusted with all her heart, be so fragile in the face of fear? Tears came, unbidden, but they were not of despair. They were tears of disbelief, of quiet rage, and of the dawning realization that her life would never be the same. Yet even as the pain carved itself into her chest, a spark ignited, a tiny, flickering flame that whispered she would survive. Not just survive, but rise. There would be no surrender, no yielding to sorrow. The life inside her deserved courage, and she would give it everything she had. The following weeks blurred into a rhythm of survival and quiet resilience. Julia learned to navigate the world differently, her eyes seeing possibilities where before there had been only obstacles. The small diner where she worked became a classroom in patience and human connection. Each tip left on the counter, each grateful smile from a customer, reminded her that the world still had pockets of kindness. She spoke to her unborn children often, not with fairy tales, but with honest truths about strength, love, and the beauty of perseverance. She told them that life could be cruel, yes, but it was also filled with moments of extraordinary grace. And in those moments, as she tucked herself into the rhythm of her days, Julia discovered something she had not known she possessed: an unshakable determination. Fear had tried to steal her sense of possibility, yet she refused to be its prisoner. Each morning she rose before dawn, preparing for the day with the quiet certainty that whatever came, she would face it with integrity and hope. She was no longer just a woman abandoned. She was a mother, a protector, and a force quietly gathering strength with every heartbeat of the life she carried. The world outside continued in its ordinary way, oblivious to the silent battles fought within the small apartment. But Julia felt it all: the weight of absence, the pull of hope, the strange exhilaration of discovering that the human spirit could endure more than it ever thought possible. And as she looked down at her growing belly, fingers tracing the outline of life yet unseen, she made a promise, not to the man who had left, but to the children who would one day fill her world with laughter. "I will never stop fighting for you. I will never stop believing in what we can be." It was a quiet promise, almost invisible against the roar of the city outside. Yet it carried the power to change everything, because courage, she realized, did not always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it came in the choice to wake up each day, to meet the unknown with steady hands and an unwavering heart. And on that morning, with the first rays of sunlight slipping through the blinds, Julia understood that her story was just beginning, and it would be one of resilience, hope, and the extraordinary strength of a mother's love. The days stretched into months, each one carrying the same quiet struggle. Yet Julia never allowed herself to be crushed by it. The apartment, once suffocating in its silence, had begun to feel like a sanctuary. She had learned the subtle art of balance: work, rest, preparation, and the small joys that kept her heart tethered to hope. There were mornings when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her, when the ache in her back and the swelling of her feet made every step feel like climbing a mountain. Yet she rose each day, driven not by duty alone, but by the unwavering knowledge that the tiny lives inside her depended on her courage. Neighbors noticed her resilience before they understood the depth of her story. There was a grace in the way she moved through the world, a quiet dignity that made people pause. Even in the briefest encounters, she smiled at the elderly woman across the hall, helped the young father struggling with groceries, and offered encouragement to co-workers in the diner who bore their own burdens. To outsiders, she was simply kind and capable, but inside, every act was a declaration. She would not be defined by abandonment or fear. She often spoke to her unborn children, sharing her dreams and the little wonders of the world she wanted them to experience. "There's music," she would say softly as the rain tapped against the windows, "and it can make your heart soar, even when the sky is gray. There are stories, and some are so beautiful you'll remember them forever." These conversations were not just about teaching them, they were reminders to herself that life, even in its hardest moments, held beauty worth fighting for. Julia began to prepare for the future in ways she had never imagined. She researched child care, medical guidance, and financial planning late into the night. She scribbled lists, mapped schedules, and taught herself to anticipate problems before they rose. Her world had become one of meticulous organization, each detail a brick in the foundation of a life she would build alone if she had to. But even as she planned, she refused to let fear dictate her choices. She dreamed boldly of raising children who would know love even in absence, of creating a home filled with laughter, curiosity, and resilience. And then, as if the universe recognized her strength, life began to shift in subtle, unexpected ways. Friends who had drifted returned, offering support without judgment. Opportunities at work grew, presenting her with small victories she hadn't thought possible. With each success, no matter how minor, Julia felt the pulse of possibility strengthen within her. She understood now that life had a rhythm she had yet to learn, one that allowed even the deepest wounds to heal slowly, invisibly, leaving room for growth. Even so, there were nights when the loneliness pressed in like a tangible weight. She would sit by the window after the diner closed, the quiet hum of the city below, and wonder what had truly changed for Tyler, the man who had walked away. She did not hate him. She simply felt the absence as a presence, a gap in her world that would never entirely vanish. But rather than letting resentment consume her, she channeled her energy toward preparation, toward building the kind of life that would honor the children she carried. She would not waste her strength on bitterness. The day she went into labor arrived on a morning painted with soft sunlight and the faint scent of rain. Julia's heart raced with anticipation and fear. Yet beneath it all was the same quiet resolve she had carried for months. She held the hands of the nurse as she focused on each contraction, speaking to the tiny lives inside her as though her words could guide them safely into the world. When the twins finally arrived, they cried in unison, a fragile yet powerful declaration of life that filled the sterile hospital room with warmth and wonder. Holding them for the first time, Julia felt an explosion of love so fierce it almost frightened her. The weight of everything she had endured, the abandonment, the fear, the nights of endless worry, fell away in that moment. Here were her children, small and perfect, entirely dependent on her, yet already the reason she could endure anything. She whispered promises she would keep forever, promises of protection, of courage, of love unwavering in the face of any challenge. As the days passed, life settled into a rhythm that was chaotic yet tender, exhausting yet rich. Julia learned to navigate sleepless nights, to soothe crying infants, to balance work and care with a precision born of necessity. She discovered that strength could emerge in small gestures, a gentle touch, a whispered word, a patient smile. And with each day, her belief in herself deepened. She was capable, resilient, and unbroken, even when the world had sought to prove otherwise. Months turned into years, and the twins grew with bright curiosity and unshakable energy. Their laughter echoed through the apartment, filling the spaces left empty by absence. Friends and co-workers marveled at Julia's ability to nurture not only her children, but herself, to find joy amid struggle. Yet she never allowed herself to forget the lessons of those first months. That courage was born in perseverance, that love could exist even without reciprocation, and that a mother's devotion could move mountains when measured in moments of quiet determination. And then, one ordinary afternoon, as Julia carried the twins from their stroller down the familiar path to the park, a figure appeared at the edge of her vision. At first, she thought it was a trick of the sunlight or the imagination playing cruel games. But as the figure drew closer, heart pounding, she realized that life had a way of circling back, of confronting the past when least expected. The man. She had long since resigned to memory, the man who had left her with fear, uncertainty, and to tiny lives to raise alone, stood there, watching her with a mixture of hesitation and awe. Her first instinct was to shield herself, to protect the fragile world she had built from the potential chaos his return could bring. Yet beneath that instinct was a flicker of curiosity, a question she could not suppress. Had he changed? Had he understood the depth of what he had walked away from? The twins, sensing the tension in her, reached up with tiny hands toward the stranger, and in that instant, Julia felt the gravity of what was to come. This was not the moment for anger or blame, it was the moment for clarity, for courage, for understanding the strength she had cultivated in the months of solitude. She straightened her back, met his gaze with the calm she had nurtured so carefully, and realized that no matter what happened next, she was ready. She was a mother, a protector, and a woman who had faced life's fiercest storms and emerged unbroken. And as the man took a cautious step forward, words caught between fear and hope, Julia understood that the story she had been living, the story of survival, of unwavering love, of relentless courage, was about to take a turn that would test every ounce of her strength once more. But she was not afraid. Not anymore. The day he reappeared began like any other, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Julia had grown accustomed to her rhythm, to the gentle chaos of life with twins, and the steady hum of work and responsibilities that kept her grounded. She was proud of the life she had built from fragments of fear, hope, and determination. Yet when Tyler stepped into the small park where she had brought her children, everything she thought she knew about closure and strength wavered for a brief moment. He did not approach her at first. He lingered at the edge of the playground, hesitant, almost fragile in his stance. Julia noticed the subtle changes in him, the lines of worry etched into his face, the faint tremor of someone who had carried regret too long to ignore. She studied him quietly, her heart a paradox of caution and curiosity. What had he come for? Apology, redemption, or was he merely seeking the part of himself he had left behind? The twins, oblivious to the tension, ran ahead, their laughter ringing. In the crisp air, they stopped suddenly, turning toward the figure who had caught their attention. Eyes wide with innocent recognition, Julia felt her chest tighten, a protective instinct rising that had been honed over years of vigilance. These were her children, her responsibility, her pride, and she would shield them from disappointment, from hurt, from any return that carried the potential for pain. Tyler's voice was soft when he finally spoke, breaking the stillness in a way that made Julia's pulse quicken. "Julia, I know I don't have the right to ask anything, but I had to see them. I had to see you." Julia took a slow breath, steadying herself. She had rehearsed countless responses over the years, imagined this moment in a dozen scenarios, but none prepared her for the storm of emotion that hit her now. Anger, curiosity, relief, and lingering sorrow collided in a mix she had long buried. Beneath strength and routine, she did not speak immediately, letting him observe the life he had left behind, the children who were both a miracle and a testament to her perseverance. He reached out, cautiously, his gaze lingering on the twins, who instinctively stepped back to hide behind their mother. Julia felt a pang of sorrow, not for herself, but for the man who had once been a part of their lives and had chosen absence over presence. "They're beautiful," he murmured, voice tinged with awe and regret. Both of them. The truth was undeniable. They were remarkable children, not just in appearance, but in the energy and spirit that radiated from them. Julia had nurtured them with love and resilience, shaping their world with patience and courage. Tyler's eyes reflected an understanding of what he had missed, and Julia felt the weight of years apart compressed into a single, fragile moment. Yet she did not soften. Not yet. She understood that true strength was not found in forgiveness alone, but in discernment, in recognizing that love without action was empty. She squared her shoulders, meeting his gaze with the unwavering resolve that had carried her through the hardest nights. "You had a choice," she said quietly, each word deliberate, heavy with meaning, "and you walked away. You have no idea what it took to get here without you." His expression shifted, pain and shame mingling in his features. He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I can't undo what I did. I know I lost my place, but I had to try to make it right, even if it's only by showing up now. I had to see you both." Julia studied him carefully, weighing his words against the years of absence, against the sleepless nights, the constant struggle, the relentless effort to provide love and stability alone. Yet she noticed something else, something she had long hoped for but never expected to see: a trace of humility, a spark of change, a recognition of the life he had abandoned. For the first time, she realized that people could carry regret not just as guilt, but as the seed of transformation. The twins, sensing the tension and the quiet invitation in her posture, slowly approached the man who had been absent from their lives. Their small hands reached toward him, cautious yet curious, and he knelt to meet them at eye level, his movements tentative, careful not to frighten or overwhelm. He spoke to them in gentle tones, his voice a soft melody of apology and wonder. Julia watched, heart swelling with complex emotions, as he struggled to connect with the lives he had not nurtured, but now sought to honor. As the afternoon light waned, Julia realized that this encounter, unexpected, fragile, and tense, was more than just a reunion. It was a test, not of forgiveness alone, but of courage, understanding, and the capacity to see beyond the pain of the past, into the possibilities of what could be built in the present. She had survived everything the world had thrown at her, had risen from despair to mastery over her own destiny. Yet now, she was being asked to navigate a delicate path of reconciliation, one that demanded the same patience, strength, and clarity she had shown in raising her children. Tyler, for his part, was silent for long stretches, absorbing the world. He had missed every gesture of the twins, every glance from Julia was a lesson in humility and awareness. The children, innocent yet perceptive, began to warm to him slowly, their curiosity bridging the chasm of absence. Julia allowed herself to observe without interference, understanding that trust would take time, and that strength was sometimes measured in restraint, not in confrontation. By the time the sun began to dip behind the horizon, painting the sky with colors that reflected both endings and beginnings, a quiet understanding had begun to form. Words had been exchanged, emotions felt and acknowledged, and a tentative bridge built from the raw materials of human resilience, love, and accountability. Julia felt something shift within herself, a recognition that the story of abandonment did not define her entirely. She had created life, nurtured it, and transformed absence into a narrative of courage. And as Tyler stood to leave that day, promising only to learn and to try, Julia understood that her role was no longer solely about survival. It was about guiding this fragile reunion, protecting her children, and allowing life to unfold in a way that honored both the strength she had forged and the possibility of redemption. The journey was far from over, yet she felt the first spark of hope that perhaps, in the intersection of past mistakes and present determination, something remarkable could emerge. The days that followed were a delicate dance, a careful balance between curiosity and caution, hope and protection. Julia had learned to trust herself, to read the subtle rhythms of her children's hearts, and now she had to navigate the presence of the man who had once walked away. Tyler's appearances were tentative at first, quiet gestures, small offerings, and an effort to understand rather than intrude. Each moment was an unspoken test, a measure of whether he could step into a world that had flourished without him. Julia noticed the change in herself almost immediately. The anger that had simmered for years, the sting of betrayal, began to soften not into forgiveness, not yet, but into clarity. She could see that he was no longer the man who had left her alone in uncertainty. He carried something heavier now, awareness, regret, and a willingness to try, not to erase the past, but to honor the life he had missed. The twins, too, began to respond to him in ways that made her cautious optimism grow. Their laughter, once exclusively her reward, now included the small, tentative giggles they shared with him. It was during one ordinary morning at the park that Julia realized the depth of change. The sun shone warmly on the playground, the air carrying the scent of fresh grass and distant rain. She watched as Tyler crouched to tie one of the twins' shoelaces, his fingers awkward but careful, and a quiet smile tugged at the corners of his lips. The child's small hand rested on his shoulder with a trust Julia hadn't expected so soon. She felt her heart tighten, not with fear, but with an unexpected surge of hope. Perhaps some bridges could be rebuilt after all. Julia herself began to speak more openly to Tyler, testing the waters with conversations that were measured and honest. She asked about his absence, about the months he had lost, about what he had learned from leaving. Each answer he offered was accompanied by pauses, reflection, and a humility that impressed her more than words could. There was no grand apology, no overpromising, only presence, acknowledgement, and a genuine effort to understand. She realized that strength was not just in enduring hardship alone, but in recognizing when someone was willing to step forward and meet her on equal footing. This realization did not erase the pain of the past, but it allowed her to envision a future that could include more than survival. It could include cooperation, support, and even the possibility of a shared joy that had seemed impossible for so long. At home, the twins' curiosity blossomed in a way that filled every room with laughter and life. Julia observed quietly as Tyler attempted to read bedtime stories, stumble through nursery rhymes, and sing songs he had never known were favorites. Each misstep was met with gentle correction from her, but she encouraged his involvement, recognizing that this was a rare opportunity for growth for him and for the family. The children began to respond to his presence not with fear or confusion, but with excitement and wonder. They began to see him as someone who could now be part of their lives. Cautiously but with genuine interest, the small victories were profound. Tyler learned the routines of their days, the small details Julia had mastered out of necessity, which blanket comforted each child, which games sparked their joy, which bedtime rituals soothed them into peaceful sleep. He was clumsy at first, yet persistent, demonstrating through action that he was ready to learn and to contribute. Julia could not help but notice the determination in him, the same determination she had carried for years, now mirrored in someone who had once abandoned her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Julia allowed herself a quiet reflection. She sat on the porch with the twins asleep in their small beds inside, sipping tea that had long since gone cold, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The months of struggle, the nights of fear and exhaustion, the relentless effort to build a life alone, all of it had forged a resilience she now recognized as unshakable. She was proud not only of surviving, but of thriving, of nurturing life and love in a world that had once seemed determined to strip it away. Tyler joined her on the porch without invitation, and she did not object. They sat together in silence, at first listening to the distant sounds of the city, the chirping of crickets, and the soft whisper of the evening wind. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that this man could be more than a reminder of the past. Perhaps he could become part of a future, carefully, thoughtfully built, a future that respected the strength she had cultivated and the life she had created. He turned to her then, eyes reflecting the sky above, and spoke with a sincerity that made her pulse quicken. "I don't expect forgiveness, Julia. I don't even expect understanding right away. But I want you to know, I'm here now. I want to be better, for you, for them, for all of us." Julia met his gaze steadily, weighing the truth in his words against the years of absence, the nights of fear, the moments she had faced alone. She understood that redemption was not given, it was earned through presence, consistency, and integrity. And yet, even as she measured the depth of her caution, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Life, she realized, had a way of circling back, offering second chances not as a replacement for what was lost, but as an opportunity to build something stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Over the next weeks, this tentative bridge between past and present began to take form. Julia allowed Tyler to participate in daily routines, to share small victories and small failures, to engage with the children in ways that honored both her authority and his newfound commitment. Trust grew slowly, naturally, and organically, built not on promises alone, but on repeated, consistent actions. The laughter of the twins became the soundtrack of a family cautiously reuniting, a living testament to patience, courage, and the enduring power of love. Julia realized that this was the true strength she had been cultivating all along, the ability to embrace change, to recognize growth, and to balance protection with the possibility of reconciliation. She had faced the storm of abandonment and emerged unbroken, and now she faced a different kind of challenge, welcoming someone into a life he had once forsaken, while safeguarding the world she had fought so hard to build. And as the night settled over the quiet neighborhood, with stars beginning to scatter across the sky, Julia allowed herself a small, private smile. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, trust would take time, mistakes would happen. But she also knew that the children, the life she had nurtured, and the courage she carried within her were more than enough to navigate this next chapter. For the first time in years, she felt not just strength, but possibility. The days unfolded with a rhythm both familiar and new. Julia had grown accustomed to the steady hum of life with her twins, yet now, each morning carried an undercurrent of anticipation. Tyler had become more present, more involved, yet there remained a tension she could not ignore, a delicate line between hope and caution, between welcoming him and safeguarding the world she had built. The twins' laughter echoed through the apartment, a reminder that life was resilient, and that joy could flourish even in the aftermath of absence. Julia noticed small changes in herself, subtle shifts that had begun as faint ripples and now ran deep. She had spent so long relying solely on her own strength that allowing another to be present felt like an act of courage in itself. It was not a surrender, nor a relinquishing of the power she had fought to claim. It was a recognition that life, at its fullest, required both independence and connection. Tyler's consistent presence had begun to ease the weight she had carried alone for so long. He did not rush, did not attempt to erase the past, but he showed through action, not words, that he could be trusted. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light into the living room, the twins asked Tyler to join them in a drawing game. At first, he hesitated, glancing at Julia for reassurance. She met his gaze with a quiet nod, a subtle invitation that conveyed both caution and trust. As he sat on the floor with them, crayons in hand, a new dynamic began to take shape, one not defined by absence or regret, but by participation, learning, and the slow building of bonds that had once seemed impossible. The twins laughed freely as Tyler attempted to draw a house with crooked lines and oversized windows. Julia observed quietly, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and cautious hope. She realized that the process of reconciliation was not about grand gestures or sweeping declarations. It was found in the minutiae of everyday life, the willingness to show up, the patience to learn, the courage to remain steady in the face of past mistakes. Tyler's presence, once a source of fear, had become a catalyst for growth, not just for him, but for the entire family. Julia began to allow herself small moments of reflection, of imagining a future where the past did not dictate every choice. She thought of her own journey from the moment she had received that note, through months of uncertainty, sleepless nights, and relentless effort to the life she had built with her children. Each challenge had forged resilience, and now she recognized that resilience was being tested in a new way, not against absence, but against fear of hope, against the possibility of trust, against the courage to embrace change without losing herself. One evening, As the children slept soundly, Julia and Tyler sat together on the porch, a blanket around their shoulders, watching the stars emerge one by one in the night sky. Tyler spoke quietly, his voice tinged with reverence and vulnerability. "I don't know how to make up for the time I lost," he admitted. "I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I want to be here, really be here, for them, and for you." Julia felt the weight of his words, but also the sincerity behind them. She knew that the path forward would require patience, consistent effort, and the wisdom to recognize genuine change. Forgiveness was not a gift to be granted lightly. It was a process, a choice made each day through action, not sentiment. Yet even as she measured the depth of caution within her, she felt a spark of hope ignite small, fragile, yet undeniable. Perhaps it was possible to build something stronger from the fragments of what had been lost. Tyler began to take on small responsibilities, each one a gesture of commitment rather than obligation. He prepared meals, helped with bedtime routines, and even learned the specific ways each child responded to comfort and encouragement. Julia watched him carefully, noting the transformation from the man who had left in fear to one who now acted with mindfulness and care. Each moment reinforced the lesson she had taught herself over the years. Strength was not only in enduring alone, but in discerning when it was safe to share life, to allow another to contribute without compromising what had been built. The twins' laughter became a bridge, connecting past absence to present hope. Their innocent joy softened Julia's vigilance without weakening it. She began to see Tyler not as a shadow of loss, but as a participant in the life she had nurtured with unwavering devotion. And in their laughter, she recognized a truth she had long carried in her heart, that love, when combined with courage and consistent action, could heal, build, and transform. Julia and Tyler slowly began to share moments of quiet conversation, learning about each other's journeys, acknowledging pain, and celebrating growth. They spoke of the past not to dwell, but to understand, to build empathy, and to recognize the humanity in mistakes. Through these discussions, Julia realized that true connection required honesty, vulnerability, and patience. Tyler had learned, through absence and reflection, that presence demanded more than intention. It required dedication and unwavering respect for the lives he had once left behind. And then came a morning that changed everything again, though subtly, almost imperceptibly. Julia noticed Tyler waking before her, quietly moving around the apartment to prepare breakfast for the children, ensuring everything was in order for the day ahead. There was no fanfare, no grand announcement, only the quiet dedication of a man determined to show, through consistent action, that he could be trusted. It was in this moment, observing his thoughtful gestures, that Julia felt a shift within herself, the realization that strength and courage were not solitary qualities, but could coexist with trust, connection, and the willingness to embrace growth together. By the end of that week, a new rhythm had settled into their lives. Tyler's presence had become part of the children's world in a way that felt natural. Though carefully monitored, Julia continued to guide him, setting boundaries and nurturing her own authority while allowing him to participate fully. The twins thrived in this environment, their laughter, curiosity, and wonder reflecting the delicate balance of stability and growth. And Julia, quietly, acknowledged that her journey of resilience had reached a new horizon, not the end of struggle, but the beginning of something richer, more profound, and deeply transformative. As she tucked the children into bed that night, she whispered promises to them once again, not of perfection, but of courage, presence, and unwavering love. And as she looked at Tyler, who watched quietly from the doorway, she realized that the story they were living now was not defined by past absence, but by the choices they made each day, the courage to show up, the strength to persevere, and the hope that even broken beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes. The morning sun streamed through the curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the apartment. Julia stood by the window, twins in tow, and breathed deeply, feeling the quiet hum of life that she had nurtured through years of challenge and resilience. Today was unlike any other. There was a sense of culmination, a subtle tension that spoke, not of fear, but of transformation. For years, she had carried the weight of absence, of fear, of uncertainty, and now, she faced a moment that would define the next chapter of her life. A chapter built not on what had been lost, but on what had been courageously created. Tyler entered the room, quiet but deliberate, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of humility and hope. He had walked a long road to get here, a journey of reflection, accountability, and growth that could not erase the past, but could shape the present. Julia noticed the care in his movements, the attentiveness in his gestures, the subtle but unwavering effort to show through action the sincerity of his intentions. There were no grand declarations, no promises too easily made, only a presence that spoke louder than any words could convey. The twins giggled as they ran to him, small hands reaching for reassurance and connection. Julia watched, a mixture of protectiveness and awe swelling within her. These children were her triumph, the living embodiment of perseverance, love, and unwavering courage. And yet, she recognized that they, too, had the capacity to witness and participate in healing, in reconciliation, in the gentle forging of new bonds. Tyler knelt to meet them at their level, his voice soft and patient, his tone filled with genuine care. It was a simple moment, but in it lay the power to reshape what had once been fractured. Julia allowed herself to feel the stirrings of something she had long denied: hope, not naive hope, nor the fleeting fantasy of a life without challenge, but a grounded, steadfast hope born of experience, resilience, and the recognition that the future could be built differently if courage and commitment were present. She had spent years proving to herself that she could survive, that she could nurture life and love in the face of abandonment. Now she was discovering that strength could extend beyond survival, that it could create, heal, and transform. Over the next weeks, a rhythm settled over their lives, one marked by care, cooperation, and the steady building of trust. Tyler took on responsibilities not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire to be present. He learned to anticipate the twins' needs, to celebrate their small victories, and to offer comfort when the world seemed overwhelming. Julia observed this growth with a careful heart, allowing trust to develop gradually, rooted in consistent action and not empty promises. She had learned that true courage was not reckless, but discerning, and that the most profound bonds were forged through patience, persistence, and authenticity. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the apartment, Julia and Tyler sat together on the porch with the twins asleep inside. The air was filled with the soft hum of crickets, the distant laughter of neighbors, and the quiet acknowledgement that life had shifted in subtle yet powerful ways. Tyler spoke softly, his voice tinged with awe and vulnerability. "I know I don't deserve this yet," he said, "but I want to be part of their lives and part of yours. In every way I can. I've learned that presence matters more than anything else." Julia felt the weight and sincerity of his words, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future in which the past did not dictate every step. She understood that forgiveness, trust, and connection were not instantaneous. They were cultivated over time, nurtured through consistent action, patience, and shared experience. And yet, she also recognized that the man before her had embarked on that journey with earnestness, humility, and courage, qualities she had long prized in herself and now saw mirrored in him. The twins, waking briefly, reached for Tyler, their small hands grasping at the warmth and reassurance he offered. Julia watched their interaction, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and awe. These moments were not just about him earning a place in their lives. They were about her witnessing the manifestation of her own strength, the tangible proof that love, perseverance, and resilience could shape a future brighter than the past. Julia realized that her story, once defined by abandonment and struggle, had evolved into one of empowerment, courage, and the possibility of unity. She had transformed fear into fortitude, isolation into connection, and uncertainty into a life filled with intention, love, and hope. The presence of Tyler, measured and genuine, did not diminish her achievements. Instead, it complemented them, offering an opportunity to demonstrate the power of trust, collaboration, and mutual respect. As the days continued, the family began to find a harmony that was both tender and resilient. Tyler's involvement grew naturally, guided by Julia's careful boundaries and the children's joyful curiosity. They created routines, celebrated milestones, and faced challenges together, each step a testament to the human capacity for growth, redemption, and unwavering love. Julia understood now that the true meaning of strength was not in facing life alone, but in embracing the courage to share life, even when trust must be rebuilt slowly. One evening, as the family sat together under the soft glow of the kitchen light, Julia reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The months of fear, loneliness, and uncertainty had forged her into a woman capable of immense resilience. The challenges she had faced alone had prepared her not only to survive, but to guide, nurture, and embrace the possibilities of a future enriched by patience, commitment, and love. She looked at Tyler, then at the twins, and whispered softly, more to herself than to anyone else, "This is what courage looks like, rising after every fall, loving even when it's hard, and believing in the possibilities of tomorrow." And in that moment, as laughter and warmth filled the room, she understood that the story of abandonment had transformed into a story of redemption, hope, and the extraordinary power of human resilience. Julia's eyes met Tyler's once more, and without words, they acknowledged the journey they had shared, the mistakes of the past, and the promise of a future built on mutual respect, courage, and unwavering dedication. The twins giggled nearby, oblivious to the weight of what had passed, yet living proof of the strength, perseverance, and love that had carried them all forward. And Julia, for the first time in years, allowed herself to fully feel the joy, the relief, and the hope that comes from knowing that even after pain, life can create something truly beautiful and transformative.